Hey guys, welcome to the Worker Environmental Awareness Training for Border. Bess from MRP. I'm going to kind of be presenting a few edits to this from the tap and switch phase as we move into Bess phase. So anytime that's me in this video, it's the modifications as we move into the Bess phase. Same resources, but just a few minor additions as we change phases on work here.
This is our Worker Environmental Awareness Program training. The purpose of this training is to familiarize everyone that is going to be involved with the Tap and Switch project down at Border with the possible encounters, concerns as it relates to ground disturbance activities from a archaeological, a tribal, and a biological perspective, to bring awareness to all those that are going to be supporting construction efforts on our projects. This is also being recorded. So for those that are affiliated with the construction activities that are not able to attend, they can access this at a later date. For those of you from Henkel's, you've probably already participated in this if you supported any of our Fresno projects, but since this training is site specific, we do ask that your teams do participate in this as well, as the hazards and other things going on at this site are not related to the potential concerns that lie within the Fresno area. As you can see, we have a whole wide panel from Rincon. They are our environmental consultant partners supporting us on these projects. So they're going to take turns kind of going over their respective subject matter expertise to discuss with you all. It's a very interactive session. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask those that are on the call as well. At the completion of this training, we will send out the links for this. We do ask that as each one of your respective team members does watch this training, if you can send an email back with the name, contact number, and email address for those that have attended. We have to maintain a log for environmental compliance purposes. So we need to have a record of that. And I see Priya's on the phone as well. So I guess for anyone that's on the call, if you can utilize the chat feature to just respond back with your name, email address, and phone number, and company you work with, so she could add that to the log as well. That'll help her start everything. But that is all I've got. I'm going to pass this over to Kevin to take over, and then we can go from there. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here this morning. Apologies if I'm coughing and sneezing. I'm rather sick, so I'll start this off with a safety moment. And there's stuff going around, so be vigilant out there. It's pretty brutal. But I'm going to open this training up, and then we're going to kick it off to our subject matter experts. We have Matt Gonzalez on the cultural front. We have Jennifer DiCenzo on the paleontological front, and then Ryan Wardle on the biological front. So with that, I'm going to kick off the Border Battery Energy Storage Best System Project Worker Environmental Awareness Program. All right, what is the Worker Environmental Awareness Program? Most of you have worked on these projects before. You're familiar with them. This outlines procedures and requirements for protection of environmental resources, as I mentioned, including cultural, paleo, biological resources on the project site. It is to provide construction personnel with information regarding the potential to encounter environmental resources and what to do in the inadvertent discovery of those resources. This program is not only due to the project site's archaeological, paleo, and biosensitivity, it's a requirement for project implementation and construction. So everybody who works on the project is required to take this training. This program will also outline the legal obligations to protect archaeological resources and penalties. The goals of this WEAP are straightforward: to be individually responsible in recognizing cultural, paleontological, and biological resources, to know what to do in order to avoid impacting these resources in a negative manner, to recognize and be aware of the potential resources or conditions that might be present on site, and by their awareness, protect the resources on site. And finally, to leave the evaluation, the importance of environmental resources to the specialists. We're here to support you, to support the project, to support MRP, to make sure that we are in full compliance. And that's what the purpose we serve on this project is to help you maintain compliance, answer your questions, and avoid impacting resources, ultimately making the project move smoothly, on time, and on budget.
There's been some updates to the impact area. It's no longer confined to the switch yard and the tap and switch work area. with additional impact areas now for the Bess area laydown and the actual Bess configuration area as seen displayed here on the map.
So with that, I'm going to kick off with Mac Gonzalez, our cultural resource expert. He's going to talk about cultural resources, how to identify them, how to avoid them, what to do if you find them. And Matt, just say next slide. I'm driving here, so when you're ready to go to the next slide, just holler at me.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. Yes, Kevin mentioned, I'm just going to go through quickly about the cultural resources. I'm sure most of you have probably been through some of these types of trainings before, so I'll try to make it quick. Cultural resources are basically the remains of prehistoric, which is the Native American side of things, and historic resources, which is usually 50 years and older. Most people have seen the common thing like arrowheads, old bottles, that sort of thing on a lot of these sites, especially in the remote areas. That's a lot of the stuff that are still around. California, and especially Southern California, is highly sensitive for cultural resources because of the ocean, because of the prehistoric lakes and all that good stuff in the area. So there is always a chance to come across cultural resources both on the surface and subsurface. Go ahead, Kevin. All right. Again, I mentioned the sensitivity of the area. There's always chances to find these sorts of things. Again, prehistoric, there's some examples of some projectile points or arrowheads here. And then the historics is the 50 years and older. Next slide. There are numerous state and federal laws that protect cultural resources, and they come with various consequences or punishments if you disturb, steal, remove cultural resources and or human remains. They come with everything from jail time to pretty hefty fines. So don't take things, don't disturb things. Let the cultural resources specialists know. Go ahead, Kev. There's some additional penalties and laws here again. Next slide. Here's some examples of some groundstone tools. These were used for food processing. There's also some bowls and metates and stuff like that they would use to grind their seeds and their food. But this is kind of some examples of what they look like. Next slide. Lithic tools, again, projectile points. Some of them can look more like just rocks, like you see on the side on the right. They would use these flakes, kind of break them off a larger stone, make some sharp edges to make some cutting utensils and scraping utensils and stuff like that. So if you see anything that looks kind of unusual with some of these jagged or sharp edges, there's a chance that it could be a tool. So let the cultural resources specialists know that's on site if you see something like these. Next. Middens, shell middens and hearts are a little more difficult to see. Hearts, sometimes you can see a concentration, a circular, usually concentration of rocks, similar to what people do today when they kind of make a rock ring and then put a fire in between it. Sometimes you'll see it. And then here, this photo shows an example of a shell midden where there's shell that's eroding out of, looks like a cut or a little eroded area here. And a lot of times these middens are also associated with some soil change, like in color. So you'll see a gray or darker soil that's kind of coming out from the fire, from the ash when they were burning and processing the food. Next slide. Here's a good example of a bowl that they would use with when it comes to cultural resources. The tribal cultural resources are specifically for the tribe. So something that's special or significant has some type of meaning to the tribe. It can be artifacts such as the ones that are photographed here. It could also be something that has to do with like their origin story or something with their past history. So sometimes it could be a trail, sometimes it could be a specific plant, tree, body of water. that is significant to the tribe. And the reason is because that's what they would use for food, for sustenance, for survival. And so depending on what happens to be in the area, it could be sensitive for tribal cultural resources. Next. Historic, again, those of you that have worked in remote areas, I'm sure you've seen some piles of cans like this, various bottles, both whole and fragmented. If you see something like this, let the archaeologists know. They'll determine if there's anything significant there. Again, as mentioned from the laws, please don't steal them or remove them, move them out of their context, because once they're moved or destroyed, all the important information that's pertinent to history is gone with it. So please leave it in place. Next. How to identify them? It is difficult, and sometimes it takes a more keen eye to identify the artifacts. But these photos that are here kind of shows the differences and how to kind of spot them. So in the top photo, you can see there's like a orangish kind of color rock. In the middle, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but there's an orange rock there, and then just to the right of it, there's kind of a flat rock that has like a sharpened edge on the right side. You can see it kind of stands out. You see the white quartz in some areas, that's everywhere. Other areas, just kind of some random rocks. But the other ones they have those sharp lines on them. And those are the ones that are modified. Down below, you can see some decorated pottery with the kind of lines and striations on them. You can see what looks like to be a pendant that has like a perfect hole that was drilled into it. If you see something that just kind of looks like it's out of place, it doesn't quite match with everything else that's around the area, it could be an artifact. So if you're not sure, just let the archaeologist or Native American monitor, whoever's on site with you, know, hey, I'm seeing this, it might be something, and then they'll be able to tell you whether it is or not. Shell and bone are usually easier to tell what they are. Again, let the specialist know. Bones are especially sensitive because it could be human remains. Leave it in place out of respect. If it is human remains, don't take photos of it, and let the specialist on site know if you see something like that. Go ahead, next slide. Here's some examples of some concentrations of historic artifacts, similar to the prehistoric middens and the herts that we showed pictures of earlier. It will be a concentration, and most times they are accompanied by a change in soil color. So you can kind of see the darkened soil down in the bottom photo there. When there's organic materials, sometimes metals, it'll change the soil, and especially when they burn the artifacts, which they did a lot of times. They would dig holes as a kind of makeshift incinerator, throw their trash in there and burn it. So you'll see concentrations like this in the change of soils if those pop up. Next slide. Here's a good example. If you're excavating and all of a sudden you see a change in soil, these are some very clear, easy to see changes. Something like this, there's a good chance there's some type of organic material or something that's related to the past. So if you see something like this, let the cultural resource specialist on site know, because chances are it's something that's related to cultural resources. Next slide. Again, some more examples of what you might see when you're excavating. Next slide. Procedures to follow. If you guys do come across something that could be a cultural resource, stop work within 100 feet of that resource and let the cultural resource specialists know. They'll be able to come in and determine if it is significant. If it's significant, additional work may need to happen in order for us to kind of determine if there's other stuff in the area. And the cultural resource specialists will be able to divert work. So you guys will be able to continue work outside of this area, but we'll need to kind of come in and do our thing just to make sure that everything that's there is protected if it's significant. If not, we can remove it and you guys can get right back to work. Next slide. I think it goes into more. For human remains, if there's bones that are found and you're not sure, stop work. This can be very sensitive, both for Native American as well as for legal issues. If human remains are found, we'll need to notify the coroner. They'll come and determine whether it's something more recent, like a crime scene that they need to take care of, or Native American burials, where there's some additional steps that need to take place. So it is a process that comes into place. So if human remains are found, we need to stop work immediately within 100 feet, similar to cultural resources, and we'll get the process going to help get work moving forward more quickly. Next step, next slide. Let's see. The ground disturbing activities that can impact cultural resources is anything that disturbs the ground. It could be grading, it could be excavating, drilling, whether it's hand or mechanical work that's done. So any of those activities, we need to be there to monitor. Next.
All right, thanks, Matt. For the first 3 days of ground disturbance on border, we will have cultural and tribal monitors on site. So if you have any questions on what was presented here or anything you see on the site, please reach out to those representatives on the site. And the representatives on site will also reach out to the folks in the field as well. So they'll be available for questions and additional information as we start digging into the ground. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to Jennifer DiCenzo for Paleontological Resources. So Jennifer, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So the Paleontological Resource is going to echo a lot of the similar stuff that you heard from the cultural team right there. So Paleontological Resources, we're talking about fossils. Fossils are typically older than 5,000 years old. And fossils are important because they can teach us a lot about past life on Earth and different things like are listed here. And they can also be really hard to determine in the field. And so that's why we're here to help support you for any kind of paleo resources that pop up. Next slide. So fossils typically aren't found in the upper soil layers like archaeological resources. They're found deeper in actual geologic formations and rock units that underlie that soil layer. This particular project site has a couple of different types of rock that could be there. Of course, we've got that upper surface soil layer, and we have about 4.5 feet of recent sediment that's there, so less than 5,000 years old. And then at about 4.5 feet, we estimate that turns into older sediments that would be much more higher sensitivity. So from the surface to 4, it's low sensitivity, 4.5, it's low sensitivity, and beyond that, it's high sensitivity. So we are able to determine these sensitivities based on what type of fossils have been previously found in those rock units and which have not. And so these are the sensitivities that are specific to this project site. Next slide. So here is a representation of things that you might see. On the right-hand side is something we see very commonly is a jawbone with teeth in it, because teeth preserve and fossilize really well. The picture on the left here is probably something more that you're going to see in the field, where it's just like light rock kind of sticking out of dark rock. And similar to what Matt was saying about seeing sharp angles and things, those are the kind of things that you want to look for with these fossils, or just kind of, it looks maybe shinier or duller, it's softer, harder. Those are the kind of things that'll trigger that, that might be a fossil. Next slide. Here's some really nice cleaned up fossils that could potentially be found from this particular unit. Again, you see a lot of teeth and skulls and those kind of parts together. And yeah, things that are extinct around here, like rhinoceros, and then things that are still around, like rabbits. Next slide. these are the rules and regulations for why we are on your project. These are California codes that govern the type of laws that say which projects need to have environmental oversight, and paleontological resources are part of that. Next slide. This here is just more of the project specific. The CEC is overseeing these, and they have very specific conditions of certification. And that's why we're here, just to make sure that you stay in compliance with those things, and then you can get your project going with little to no disruption from us. Next slide. And here's the protocol. If you see something that looks like it might be a fossil, stop work in the immediate vicinity. So you can move over to like another 25 feet even for paleo resources. Just block off that area, give us a call. I could meet down at the border in 20 minutes, so I can come check it out. Just pause on that specific area where you're working and call in the expert to come in and say whether it's a fossil or not. Similar to the archaeological resources, you don't want to pick it up or move it. Don't bring it into the office and take a picture of it there and send it to me. Just leave it there. Best thing to do is maybe just put your foot down next to it and snap a shot so I can see how big it is and kind of get a little bit of perspective there, and shoot the picture over to me, and I can most often write it off immediately in a picture, and then we can also just come and do a project visit and write it off that way. Next slide. So again, it's just unlawful to damage or destroy fossils during your project. And if you see anything, stop and give us a call. And just another reminder that we're not going to have a paleo monitor on this particular site. So it'll really just be a team effort of everybody looking out for the fossils. Next slide. This is a list of stuff that would damage or destroy a fossil, the same kind of grading, any kind of ground disturbance, subsurface, earthwork. Next slide. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it. So we may encounter paleo resources, we may encounter archaeological resources, but we will almost definitely encounter biological resources on the project. They may impact the project directly or indirectly or not at all. So this is an important kind of part of this project, not that the others are not, but this is something that is more likely to be involved in the project in my experience, especially with nesting season coming up. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Brian Wardle, our biological resource expert, on things to look out for and how, excuse me, how best to avoid these resources. So Ryan, take it away.
Morning, guys. Let me know if you can't hear me or anything. But yeah, if you want to just go to the first slide. So, kind of just in summary, there's a lot of environmental laws regarding biological resources. So that can be, federal laws, like the Federal Endangered Species Act. California has its own state Endangered Species Act. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act is actually an international treaty between multiple countries, just due to the way birds migrate. So kind of at all these different levels, different types of laws and things apply, a lot of different acts. So there's definitely potential to run afoul of those, and that's kind of the goal of what this is for. And what we're trying to do on this is just keep the project moving smoothly and not get tangled up with any kind of issues for any of these. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, there's penalties for individuals as well as for the company as a whole. So, never just assume it's like, I'm going to just take this nest out because it'll keep the project moving along and, whatever. It's like, no, you could be personally liable as well as your company. So it's not ever really good to kind of get involved with any of this. So we're just going to try and do full avoidance, not have any impacts, not get into any of these because, it is both personal and organizationally liable. So yeah, we can move on from that one. So yeah, this is, a common one that comes up on pretty much every project. So I'm sure you guys have heard this before for nesting birds. So nesting bird season's typically February 1st through August 31st. September 1st And so raptors can start breeding earlier. So raptors, hawks, eagles, stuff like that. So they can kind of start their nest since they're a lot bigger. It takes them longer to kind of build that. But most passerines, kind of songbirds, typical things you're really going to see in the spring, kind of depending on the site. Certain ones that, especially if they're the migratory birds that come up a little bit later, they might be nesting more through the summer and kind of into the fall. But typically that kind of February, March, April, May, is when we're going to see the bulk of that. And then June, July, August kind of tapering down. And like you can see in this photo here, even birds will nest in the equipment. They'll nest in the structures on site. Anything that's this nice little nook and cranny that they can find that they'll feel safe in, they will use. So one thing that I always recommend to crews during the nesting season is just move your equipment around, every few days. If it's, don't really need the excavator for a while, and just leave it in the laydown. Birds are going to see that. They're going to start eyeballing it, find that little, crevice up in the top. And then all of a sudden, now that equipment is out of commission until that nest finishes, which, can be, a couple weeks or a month or so. And so if something's sitting for a long time, just go move it around the lay down a little bit, because that just deters them, kind of scares them off, so that they don't see that as a viable site. So, other things too, is just on like the eaves of temporary structures and buildings and work areas. Just keep an eye out for anything like that, because if it's identified early enough, they can be deterred. But if it's kind of something's left and missed, then that can become a big problem. With this project, we'll have pre-construction, nesting bird surveys during the nesting bird season, every 2 weeks, and that'll kind of be valid for like a 10-day window. And then when it's outside, just once a month, kind of, a general assessment just in case. So, yeah. Go next slide. Nesting birds, you often think of just the big stick nest. That's probably what you're picturing. But some birds nest in cavities, like in little holes and stuff. Some will nest directly on the ground under vegetation, shrubs, trees. Some are hanging, there are all kinds of different nests. So good things to also look out for is birds like carrying sticks, grass, twigs, stuff like that. They're not, playing fetch or something. Like if you see a bird carrying a twig or something like that, it's building a nest. That's the only reason they're ever going to be doing that. So if you see something like that, that's definitely a good time, to reach out. If there's a bio on site, there probably won't be full-time bio monitoring for this unless something does come up. But, just give us a call, say, hey, I think there's a bird building a nest here. We can make sure to get out, check that out, figure out what's going on there. Different species have different sensitivities, different buffers. Sometimes if it's, outside of the work area, maybe it's not going to bother them so much. Or if it's like right in a piece of equipment, that could become kind of a big delay. So if you see anything, birds fighting, carrying food, if they got like a grasshopper or something, just anything that you feel is a little bit suspicious is worth pointing out, because when it's caught early enough, it can usually be deterred. But if it's like, oh, I didn't, I saw that a couple weeks ago and didn't say anything, and now there's an active nest, work can get put on delays or buffers or other inconveniences like that. So yeah, just keep an eye out for any of this stuff, and better to reach out early. So yeah, in addition to, nesting birds, there's potential for burrowing owl. So, they're kind of an unusual bird. They live in holes in the ground. It's got to be a couple inches in diameter. If it's, a real small, like a little mouse burrow, they're obviously not going to fit in that. But if you ever see any good sized burrows on a project, that's potential for burrowing owl. That's potential for other things as well. But, that's a good one. If you see any large burrows, especially if there's kind of, they call it like whitewash, just kind of like bird poop and pellets and stuff all across the front. That's a really good indication that there's probably burrowing owl activity. They're birds, they fly, they can just show up in the middle of the night. So you could be in on a Tuesday, nothing's there, come back on Wednesday, all of a sudden that hole is occupied now. So if you do see anything like that, again, it's good to just note ahead of time. We can come check it out, look for potential, and there may even be the option to get some cameras or try and determine if that is in fact occupied before it becomes a problem. with burrowing owls again, specifically too, pipes, stuff that you're maybe staging on site that are open, they're going to see that and think this is the best, most solid burrow they've ever seen. And they will occupy those. So good idea. Keep things, end capped, piece of visqueen or something over the ends can go a long way to keep these guys out of stuff. Addition to burrowing owls as well, we got just common raptors. So, red-tailed hawks, harriers, other things like that that may be nesting in and around the work area. So, especially, when you get into transmission lines, those can be good structures. And I'm sure you've seen, raven nests and other hawk nests in those. So if you see any of those on site, even if there's no activity, they'll often reuse the same nest year after year. So that's a good one to flag again, just like, hey, there's this big old stick nest up in one of the transmission lines, up on one of the structures. That's a good thing to come check that out and make sure if it's occupied or not. Because again, like, golden eagles, bald eagles, other eagles have even more protection. Raptors tend to get pretty big buffers put around that. And so just being very aware of those types of things early, can make a big difference. So, yeah, just flagging and notifying anyone of that, because easier, again, find it early, see what's going on, figure out ways around it, versus once it's established, can become kind of a tricky thing to work around. So
just some general reminders about wildlife on site, trash, keep that secure and containers accessible to wildlife. This is good general housekeeping stuff. I know that you guys are good about in general, but just a good reminder, we don't want to lure anything in that may not already be present, and all those good food wrappers are always something that may draw in wildlife. So let's be real careful on the trash. Excavations need to be covered or have entry and escape ramps. So, for trenches, easy to add an earthen ramp or put in a board at, about a 30 or so degree angle that if something were to fall in, would not be trapped and would be able to get out. If it's something more like a bore pit or straight down, make sure those are covered, as stuff that falls in may have no ability to get back out. Same for pipes. They look like great habitat for wildlife to make their nests for birds, other things to try and burrow in there and such. So just make sure any small diameter pipes, about 4 inches to a couple feet wide are capped or covered, and that anything that's, going to get buried is inspected prior to doing so, because we don't want any wildlife to become trapped in those overnight.
Yeah, and again, it's all stuff you guys have heard, don't pick them up. Don't, if you see a nest, just leave it be. Take, the term take is kind of ambiguous, but that can include, even relocating a species successfully, if it's protected, can be considered take. So like, again, don't be thinking, oh, I was just moving this guy out of the work area because, I thought that was the right thing to do. We didn't want to cause delays. Like, that can still be considered a, take and cause problems with that. So just always better to call it, send some photos of something, be like, just get it, let us know. We'll figure out kind of the best way to handle that. So don't be, moving or handling wildlife on site. Dogs, again, don't have dogs, firearms, these are all kind of standard things. But yeah, nests, anything that's unusual or unclear that you think maybe is biologically sensitive, just, let us know. And we can, figure out how to proceed with that in the quickest and, most compliant way. So, yeah, I think that's everything for bio. Oh, yeah, one more, I think. So obviously removing trees, vegetation, animals can be living in that, especially during nesting season. That's great habitat for birds. If it's just an open grassland and you're, grading, blading through that, overland travel, stuff like that can be disturbing to wildlife that maybe didn't notice was underground, something like that. Same, for excavating. Waters stuff, if there's creeks, if there's even ephemeral drainages, those can be really sensitive for CDFW, Army Corps, Regional Water Quality Control Board, multiple different agencies that can take jurisdiction and require permits. And so anytime there's any kind of waterway, even if it's just a little ephemeral runoff after a storm sort of thing, be real sensitive about that. Again, better to just stop for a second, send some photos, ask some questions rather than, accidentally get into something that can become a huge problem down the line. We already covered pipes and trash.
There's also the potential for contaminated soils. So anytime during grading or other earth disturbance, if contaminated soils are encountered, please stop and contact our environmental project manager. Work should not resume until the area has been inspected and adequately characterized by the project soil specialist. That's maybe things like staining, odors, ash, debris, just if you think that there's any potential that the soil is contaminated on site. Just go ahead, stop work, notify us, and we'll be able to figure out what's needed to get moving on that again.
So just to wrap up some general points of contact, again, my name is Kevin Hostert. I represent the project manager of the project here. I work directly with Ryan, with Jennifer, with Matt. So I'm an excellent kind of connection point if you have general questions. Also, if there are specific individuals on site at the time, ask them questions. If you're uncertain of things, they're right in front of you, so you can talk to them in person. If you got any general questions or specific questions, they'd be happy to talk with you. Josh M is going to, from my understanding, represent MRP on this project. Again, Matt Gonzalez is the cultural point of contact. This is his information here.
Update to our paleontological point of contact. Andrew McGrath now leading as our paleo expert.
And the biological point of contact for this project, even though Ryan Wardle was presenting here, Jacob Hargis is going to be the qualified biologist on site. Again, you can reach out to me directly first. I can usually then relay the information to the appropriate party and get things moving pretty quickly. I'm always available nights and weekends whenever you're working. So reach out to me whenever you need. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. So if there's any additional questions, any uncertainty for this, we look forward to working with the crews on this. Again, we're not here to get you in trouble. We're not here to trick you. We're here to make sure this project gets completed on time, on budget, and most importantly, within environmental compliance for federal, state, and local regulations. So that's exactly what we are here to do: support the project team, and make sure this project gets done. So I'm going to wrap it up and open it up to questions or kick it back to you, Andrew.
Nope, that is all. Appreciate everyone's time for calling in. For those that joined late, if you have not already, please add your name, company name, phone number, and email address in the chat feature so we can log your attendance, and then we will be good to go. But appreciate everyone joining. Have a good weekend and be safe.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thanks everybody.